Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in New York, from the City of Angels in Los Angeles and the Big Apple in New York City. Welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, Adrienne Gruberg, who is not here today because she's fixing her computer, as if she knows how to fix a computer. Anyway, we're coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on 25 global audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Facebook Live, SoundCloud, Blog Talk Radio, and about 20 more other platforms all around the world. And we're so proud to be voted the #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM, and one of the top 6 best podcasts by Caring.com, as well as #3 podcast out of thousands of caregiver podcasts on FeedSpot. Well, I'm sweating here in LA. It's like 109 degrees outside. Air conditioning never works when you want it to. Anyway, we have an exciting show planned for you today. And I would normally say, don't we, Adrienne? And she says, yes, we do. We have Jim Dowda, registered nurse, and his beautiful wife, Mona Dowda, a physical therapy assistant. And but before we get started, I want to take this moment to thank my last week's guest, Larry Nassaney. Larry is Senior Vice President, Chief Commercial Officer for Genworth U.S. Life Insurance segment, including Care Scout. And he is a wonderful guy who educated us on life insurance and long-term care insurance, which every caregiver should have. And hopefully their loved one has it, but if you don't, it's too late. They're already, that's the kind of thing you need to get when you're late 40s, early 50s, when it's cheap enough. And I've got mine. I hope you got yours. Anyway, you can listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of those other 25 global networks that I mentioned earlier. All right, enough of that. Our guest today is Jim Dowda, male nurse in registered nurse and he just happens to be a male. You know, there's no stigma anymore with being a male nurse, right? You think of those Seinfeld episodes. And Jim is on the front lines right there in West Palm Beach, and he works in the ER. And during the beginning of the pandemic, he got the brunt of it. I'll let him tell his story. And Mona, his beautiful wife, who does physical therapy, and she always gives me great advice for all my many surgeries that I go through with my ankles and my arms and my legs and my knees and this and that. So God bless you both. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dave. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And just pardon me for wiping the sweat off my brow. You know, we're just not used to this kind of weather. But how's the weather over there in Florida? Probably worse than here, huh?
It's heat index is 104 today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see your little fan working up. I need to install a fan in my studio. Isn't that a great idea? I'll have Cousin Dan do it.
There you go.
Right. So I always like to ask my guests, and you've been on the show before, so this isn't your first rodeo.
Right.
And you were such a hit last time. And now, especially during COVID-19, everybody, I mean, if you're conservatives, you believe one way about what's going on and conspiracy theories. And if you're a liberal, you believe one way about what's going on in conspiracy theories. Everyone thinks the other one is doing a conspiracy theory. So this is a very apolitical show. That means we're not going to talk politics. We're not going to bash the Republicans or the Democrats or Trump or Pelosi. We're just going to Joe Friday. Remember that show, Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. So I want to, can you do that? Can you raise your right hand and say, I will not be political? Okay. As he walks with a capitalism shirt on. But, you know, it's okay because America is a capitalistic nation and hopefully will remain one. I just became political. Okay. So I like to ask my guests, just who is Jim and Mona and why were they put on this earth? Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, I'm a registered nurse, have been for a little over 30 years, and I believe one of the reasons I'm here, my personal belief system, is that I'm here to make the world a better place, help people, and be a blessing to God and man, help people who are in need. And that's one of the benefits I get from my job. It's very gratifying. I see a lot of people come in with a lot of fear and anxiety with teaching. They can you can literally see the anxiety reducing. I love it when they come in sick and they go home better. It's a very gratifying job.
You're a healer.
And my wife is too, from a different angle.
Right, and I'm Mona Dowda, and I really follow what Jim is saying. I love being a helper to anybody. I don't need the accolade of it. I just enjoy helping. I take care of my parents as a side thing. My dad is 92 and my mom is 89. And as they get older, I know, right? As they get older, they're getting, we're just here to be a help and a blessing and whatever we can do to make their lives better. So anyway, cool. I also work in physical therapy with seniors, and I love what I do very much. And when you love what you do, you're good at it.
I will say this, Dave,
that we're very passionate about it.
Yeah, yep. The last few months have been pretty intense, and I'm glad that you're addressing this because it's all over the place now. But the topic, but it has been pretty intense. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just got back from CNN, did a essential medical conference there, the hot spot. People say, "What are you, crazy? You're going there?" I says, "You think I'm going to turn down missing Dr. Drew, Dr. Oz, Dr. Jocelyn Elder, 15th Surgeon General, and Dr. Mark Siegel, who just a few months ago I didn't even know who he was. Now he's all over Fox News." And I learned a lot. And I learned that this whole topic is very, very political, and it shouldn't be. I like the way Mark Siegel says or maybe it was Dr. Drew, he says politics plus science equals politics. You know, there's just, you don't win. And now, you know, because of politics, we're not doing testing of drugs that could be working, you know, and it's just sad. This has never happened in history. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, explain, you are actual recipients of COVID-19. Explain how that happened and how it is that your wife joined you in that privilege.
Well, that was my fault.
Oh, it was your fault.
Probably.
Okay.
But what happened is that March 23rd, I came down with the COVID virus myself. What had happened is that several weeks before that, the COVID began to really hit, and the hospital I work at had to make some radical policy decisions. And actually, while I was out on quarantine, they developed them even further. But what happened was that we were admitting patients, and they weren't being checked in the ER because, one, we didn't have a way of doing it, and two, we didn't really know what we were doing. This has been a whole learning curve for everybody.
And when so was this? What month? What day?
March.
Okay.
Around March. End of February, March. So people would come in, and then we'd find out after they'd already been admitted, and after they'd been around all these other people, that they had the COVID virus. And that's how several nurses came down with it themselves, because we would admit the patient.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did they have testing at that time to know?
They didn't.
And how soon how did they know they had COVID then?
Well, they developed it soon after. For example, whenever on March 23rd, I began to develop a temperature, cough, and a deep fatigue. So I went to my hospital's ER. They tested, and at that time, they didn't get the results back for 10 days. By the time this whole thing ended, I was getting my results back by the next day. But now, under certain circumstances, we can get it back within 15 minutes. But that's very expensive, and only the ER and the OR can do that. Usually it's the next day. So I was tested, and I was on quarantine until I got the results back, which was 10 days later, and I found out that I was positive. And,
And then Mona, I mean, how did she get it?
Oh, yeah. So, by the way, sorry, Mona.
Yeah.
So, at home, I tried to quarantine myself, which is a nice try, but it's practically impossible. Even though I stayed in my bedroom, I wouldn't come out without a mask on, and et cetera. But 2 days later, she began coming down with the symptoms, though her symptoms and mine were a little different from each other. We both had the COVID virus.
Wow. That's a bummer. So
Yeah.
what were your symptoms? Did you need to be hospitalized? I mean, were you on the brink of death?
Well, at the time, they didn't want you to come to the hospital unless you really had to, because the hospitals, all of them, were being flooded with the COVID patients. So my symptoms were a temperature of 103. I had a dry, frequent cough, and a really deep fatigue, where you would get up. I would get up and go to the kitchen, have a couple of bites of yogurt, then have to go back to bed and just. But also, I had lost my sense of smell and taste, which is really strange. And then Mona's symptoms were a little different.
Right, I had a migraine, fever. We threw up. You had the runs, and also lost my sense of smell and taste. And like he said, deep fatigue. Yeah.
It actually took us about 10 days to get our sense of smell and taste back, but even now, it's not quite what it was before. And I've heard that from other nurses who've caught it. It's very strange.
So you're still affected in some ways. What other ways are you still affected, or maybe anticipate that you'll be affected for the rest of your life, if possible?
Well, the only thing that I'm experiencing now is my sense of taste and smell are not as sharp as it used to be. Food tastes a little bland to me where it didn't before. And I don't know, what are you experiencing now, Mara?
I would say a little shortness of breath when I exert myself, and also, a fatigue that I certainly didn't have before.
Yeah, I think my endurance is a little bit lower, but I know of some nurses who had caught it. For example, I've got one nurse I work with who smells constantly something burning, a burning smell. And then my nurse manager who caught it, she still has some chest pain and some shortness of breath. A very strange disease.
Wow. So explain the story you told me of how you actually caught it, that you had the ER door was just flooded with people and they were just rushing in. There was no security. What happened? Explain that.
Well, what happened is that when this whole thing began, people were having these weird symptoms. They'd come to the ER, and again, at the beginning, they didn't have any way of testing that. So they would admit them, and then the day after they were already on the floor, we'd say, oh, by the way, blah, 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 blah. And that way, a lot of people were exposed to it, including myself. Now, I can't prove it, but I think the way I was exposed is I had a young man come in, and he was going to have some minor surgery, and he was with his mom. And the next day after, I'd already spent an hour admitting him. We found out that he had the COVID virus, or he was being ruled out. But I had already spent an hour in the room with both of them, and then it was soon after that I came down with my own symptoms. So, and I know of other nurses who encountered.
Didn't you tell me someone actually vomited on you?
No, not this time.
Okay.
Maybe another time, but not this time.
I'm mixing my stories up then. So what's going on today? I mean, how has your hospital progressed? And you know more, obviously, about the virus than you did before. What are the good things? What are the bad things?
Well, again, this whole thing has been a real learning curve, Dave. But we devoted 2 whole units, and each unit is about 40 beds, to the coronavirus, and then we had to add one more. So we had 1 unit for what we call rule out COVID. That's for the people that we were suspicious of and they were testing. And then we had 2 units for the patients who had ruled in for the COVID virus. Since then, we have been able to decrease the patients on the floor, and so we have less than what we did. But again, we had to devote 3 entire units to this. And the nurses on those units have to be in total isolation. They have to wear the gowns, the mask, the face shield, the gloves, the whole thing. And they're not allowed to go to other parts of the hospital. And also we had to limit, for a while we had no visitors whatsoever. And now we've changed it where you can have 1 visitor at a time. And you can't have multiple, just 1 visitor at a time for a certain length of time. So things are easing up a little bit as we learn more and as we have less patients coming in. Again, like you said, there's a lot of fear involved with this, and a lot of people we're calling everything COVID that it may not have been. Again, I'm not blaming anybody as part of the learning curve because we just didn't know. When my infectious diseases doctor got hold of me, we had to do exactly what we're doing now. It was a teleconference, so he could do this from his office. And he was sharing, Jim, that this is just, we're learning as we go because we've never experienced this before. Yeah, so it's been very interesting. But we have less patients coming in now. So
That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that we have more patients being exposed, more people being exposed, but yet other hospitals have heard about having less people coming in. So I'm really not sure what the story is there, but I do know that we have less than we did before.
Well, I think one of the reasons why we have a lot less people dying and like coming down with really bad symptoms is because they kind of flushed out the seniors by really isolating them. They've encouraged them to stay home, not go out, not go to church, not grocery shop. And so you have a lot of caregivers and a lot of other younger people doing some of that work that, seniors were doing independently themselves. I think, younger people that are healthier, yes, they're getting the virus, but we're not seeing the severe symptoms and the dying that we were seeing before.
Yeah. Did you experience any shortage of masks, gowns, all that stuff in the beginning?
We did. Actually, we were recycling masks, which I wasn't too thrilled about, but they weren't just exchanging masks. They were putting into a special box with our names on it, and they were irradiating them or doing something with some noxious gas that killed bacteria, then give them back to us. But happily, most of that was happening while I was on quarantine. So by the time I came back, much of it had been resolved.
It went like that for about a month or so, I guess, right?
Yeah, a little over, about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, even the toilet paper, all that craze was going on. I don't know if you had toilet paper craze going on in California.
Of course, the whole country. maybe the world.
That was crazy.
Between the Lysol, the antibacterial, the alcohol, and the toilet paper, we were also experiencing mask shortages. But I'll tell you, one thing that I saw that I think was just awesome is neighbors and people were using their gifts, talents, and supplies to make things that we were able to use in the intern until masks were, available again. They were using the hospital-grade masks for hospitals, and so they were leaving normal people like us without. I actually have a cousin named Dave Nassaney that was such a blessing. He sent me a couple of masks to hold us over until we could, get some on our own. And boy, he really, really came through. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
I know that guy. He's awesome.
He's awesome.
Very humble man.
He is.
But you know what, Dave? That we had some, like Mona was saying, with some neighbors who were making homemade masks, and when people found out that she was a PTA and I was an RN, I tell you, people treat us like gold, like we were like heroes on D-Day, and they were
like
giving
firemen on 9/11, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It was weird, but it was kind of nice, but it's kind of uncomfortable too. But it was nice.
Yeah.
That's because you're so humble. Now, did your hospital become like maxed out and you couldn't take any more? You had to send them to other places. Was it ever like that?
We did intermittently, but that usually lasted about a day or so. And anybody who absolutely didn't have to come to the hospital, we discouraged them from coming. And we had stopped all elective surgeries, which was a real problem because elective surgeries are one of the major ways a hospital makes money. And this is why so many hospitals are hurting financially. People tend not to think of it like that, but hospitals are a business. And if you stop their main source of income, i.e. elective surgery, they're going to be hurting. And they'd stopped all overtime. They'd stopped all agency nurses coming in. If you work short, you just work short because they had to get the money back some way.
Does that mean you were not getting paid for all of this COVID activity that you were overwhelmed with? The hospitals?
I never had a problem with that, but I do know that just a few weeks ago, they're running short again, and they're offering bonuses, and I've heard several nurses having difficulty getting those bonuses. I'm sure that's resolved pretty quickly now, but I'd heard they were having some difficulty. but we always got the paycheck. There was no problem.
You know, I
When?
think one of
Go
the
ahead.
things that were happening at the hospital is they were overworking the staff that were there. You know, with the amount of cleaning and taking off and putting on, and it just, I mean, Jim was just coming home completely like done, emotionally, physically, you know, the whole thing. And it really affects, you know, he was like he's a professional caregiver, but it really does affect your sleep and your eating and your social life, everything. You're just, I think they were just maxing everybody out, not only for the fear of it, but the fear even of getting it again. But even masking and gloving and gowning and all that is just a lot of, you're working harder for less, for sure.
Yeah, and it lowers your immune system, which makes you more vulnerable to catching it as well. And so, tell me, Mona, when you got it, were your symptoms similar to his, or were they slightly different? And were you two both like freaking out? Oh my God, because nobody knew anything about it at the time. Did fear kind of go into overdrive with you, and how did you control the fear and the uncertainty?
My symptoms were similar to Jim's. I didn't have it as long, and I don't know if it was like a mental thing, like moms can't get sick. Like I'm a caregiver. Like I even had to find coverage for my parents while I was
You're a
kind of
caregiver to them too, right?
yeah. And even wearing a mask. I think, you know, for us personally, there was really minimal fear for each other. I think our hugest concern was transmitting it to the family, to my parents, and also, you know, that the threat of the extended family warning us, you better not give it to them. Seriously. Um, but as far as like recovery and all that, I don't think we had any fear. And the fact is that we deal with people that die often. We deal with big sicknesses. We've had our own challenges. And so you know, I don't think that we battled the amount of fear. We did have a lot of peace through it. Most of it was just trying to keep other people that were all keyed up. I mean, I have to say, my mother specifically dealt with very bad anxiety. I mean, she just freaked out when we brought groceries in. Everything had to be washed and cleaned, and don't stand too close, and don't touch your father. You know, just all that.
They're in their 90s. They're in their 90s.
Around 90, yeah.
Dad's 92, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we had our kids are
They're all grown.
Yep,
Grown.
and when they heard that we had the COVID-19, they all wanted to come home and take care of us, which we were very grateful for. We said, guys, don't come here. Mona and I tend to take things in stride. So I wouldn't say we're dancing around carefree, because we were very sick. We did need to be hospitalized. But at first, Mona took care of me. And then when she came down, I tried to take care of her. And then we just looked at each other. We just did the best we could for a couple of days. And the first week was really tough. The second week, we felt better, but the second week we were very, very weak. But then after that, we quickly began gaining our strength back. And after 5 weeks, I finally tested negative, and I went back to work. It took Mona 7 weeks. But the last 3 weeks for each of us actually wasn't bad. But the first 2 weeks...
How many tests before they know that you're not positive?
Well, at the time, I was being checked every 10 days.
I had 7 tests, 7 swabs. It felt like they were, you know, rubbing the back of my brain.
Oh, I hate those.
Yeah,
No kidding.
but I want to say that, like, this was before, again, we were like the first batch of people to get it. So they were really waiting.
Invasive.
Right. So they were really waiting for us to have 2 negatives in a row. Now they're not really as concerned about that, it seems. I don't know, but yeah, you know, I want to go back to the anxiety thing. I think, you know, what happens when probably California deals with earthquakes, and, you know, wherever you live that has catastrophic tendencies, the news hypes you to the max. We recently had a concern about a hurricane coming, And I mean, the news now runs 24/7. You can get it on anything you hold or look at. It just feeds that fear factor, and which is very different than years ago when you come down with something, you just kind of move on. But I think the COVID-19 thing with the fear, the fear factor was increased because they were shoving so much information without a lot of knowing, what's going to happen. And people what else was there to do except to listen and watch?
Right. And it's good for ratings, it's good for their profits, so they have a vested interest in keeping us afraid. I'm glued to the TV. Which is Let's take a short break. We'll be right back because I got a lot of questions to ask. Dave Nassaney, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too, Thrive to Stay Alive as a Caregiver. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. He now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his amazing caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first, before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too, Thrive and Stay Alive as a Caregiver, will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere and at caregiverdave.com. And we're back with Jim Dowda, registered nurse, and his lovely wife, Mona Dowda, physical therapist. And we're talking about COVID-19, coronavirus, Wuhan virus, whatever you want to call it. We know what it is. And they're on the front lines, and they're in West Palm Beach, and we're just talking about just the facts, no politics, etc. Now, I'm going to get very close to politics, but I'm not going to cross the line here. There's an article going out, and people are talking about that who and how many actually have the virus. I'm hearing numbers of 200,000, 180,000, 170,000, 160,000. And then this article comes out that says, oh, by the way, 94% of these didn't necessarily die from COVID-19, but they had other issues. And, of course, the right is saying, they're lying to us, only 9,000 died, and the left is saying, no. Once you have other issues, that's a death sentence. Just because you had diabetes doesn't mean you're going to die, but mixed diabetes and COVID, now you're going to die. So give me the apolitical answer to this question. Are they both wrong? Wait a minute. I muted you. Okay, go ahead. Start over.
Okay. You want to know my answer? This is it.
I do want to know your answer.
I have no idea, Dave. I do know that there's a reason why so many elderly people have died from it, because most elderly people have secondary issues. Few of the younger have, but of those younger, they have had issues. And the nurses that I've worked with who've caught it have had secondary issues like asthma or something of that sort. But I really had no major issues that I know of. I'm not a diabetic. I don't have respiratory issues. But
not overweight.
I caught it. Well, I am overweight. So is most of
Work
America.
on that, buddy.
Me and most of the U.S. But so I really can't give you a straight answer on that. I don't know how many people actually have had it. I do know that as we've gotten a better grip, I know that we have less people coming in. I know that we are developing other medication. I was just reading an article yesterday that said that when people started being given steroids when they came in, that decreased the ramifications of having the disease, and less people died because of that. I know that I was reading another article that said that in Iceland they found out that the antibodies disappeared after 4 months, but I've had it 5 months ago, and every time I give platelets, which is about every week, they always check for antibodies, and I still have antibodies. So I don't know how accurate their study was because I've had it a month longer than what they said, and I still have antibodies. Mona is giving plasma for the COVID patients, and I already gave platelets for a variety of things. So yeah, and
so they're checking our antibodies,
each
and
time.
we're still showing that we have them.
All right, a little education here for those who are unfamiliar with the terms antibodies and plasma and platelets. What's the difference between giving blood and giving plasma, or is there a difference? And just explain as a layman, like a sixth grader, what all this stuff means.
When somebody gives blood, they're referring usually to whole blood. That means you get the red blood cells, the white blood cells, platelets, plasma, etc., and that you can give every 8 weeks. When you're giving plasma, plasma is the liquid part of the blood, and that carries the resistance whenever you give convalescent plasma, they call it, to somebody with COVID, that helps them to get better. And you can give that you can give it twice a week, but the American Red Cross recommends once every 28 days for your health. When you're talking about platelets, which is the clotting factor of the blood, I can give once a week, which is what I do. Now, the platelets doesn't affect the COVID, but it does help other people with the other issues, so I just continue to do what I'm already doing. And Mona gives plasma.
So the plasma that you're giving to other people, that you're giving to the hospital, that they give to other people, they're giving to people who are not COVID infected yet? Is that what you're saying? Or are they giving it to people who are COVID infected?
The plasma is being given to the COVID infected, and they've had very good results with that.
Early on in treatment.
Right, because
Yes.
the plasma carries the antibody.
The resistance.
Resist from one person to the next.
And an antibody, explain what that is and why it helps someone who has COVID.
It's part of your immune system. It's like it's the white blood cells that fight that particular disease. And because we have had the COVID-19, it's like our white blood cells have been imprinted with that. So when it comes across it again, it fights it. And there's been a lot of debate upon how long those antibodies will last. Some people say because the COVID-19 is called that because there are other COVID diseases out there. This is the 19th one. And so because they're still learning exactly what this means, they're thinking at first that the antibodies of resistance could last a very long time, like other COVID diseases. But now they're saying maybe it only lasts 4 months. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Right now they just don't know. I know that every time we give a blood product, they check us for antibodies, and so far it's been 5 months for us, and we still have antibodies. So they're going to keep using Monas for the convalescent plasma, and they'll keep using mine just like they always do. I give a lot of mine for the cancer patients, for other this, and for a variety of causes. So, there's a reason for each of us to give blood, and we still have the antibodies.
Are they as strong as they were 5 months ago? Or
again, the study I read yesterday said that they're strong initially afterwards, then they plateau, and then it stays the same. I don't know how strong mine are. All I know is I still have them, and the same with Mona.
strong enough to be useful. So it's kind of like plasma is kind of like giving your immune system extra ammunition, bullets, because they're running low on bullets. I'm the king of analogy. Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Now, you said something interesting, COVID-19, that there's 19 of them, because I never knew why it's called COVID-19. Can you explain that? Does that mean that this thing has mutated 19 times, or no?
No, what it is, Dave, is that when it first came out, for a while they were calling it the nouveau COVID, because there's a new COVID disease, because it has the same basic cell, the COVID cell, but it's different enough to be a different aspect of it. That's why it's called the COVID-19. There aren't different versions of the same one, but the different versions of something which has a foundation of the COVID virus.
The COVID virus was renamed the corona virus, which means crown. I guess the actual virus looks like a crown. That's why right? So the COVID is just a shortened term. And from what I understand, like with some of the viruses that were COVID, not in 19, but not Ebola.
I could be wrong, but I think chickenpox might be one of them.
Oh,
With SARS, there you go. Yep.
SARS,
Yeah,
yeah.
like those. So that might have been like COVID-8. I don't know, but like
I
that.
see. Yeah. It's
I
it's in the
thought it was
family.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have a question from one of our Facebook Live people. Since a lot of these people are caregivers, they want to know what was the caregiving experience like, and was there a lot of fear? Because you're caregivers, and you're caring for your parents, both of you are, and so you're probably more fearful for them than you were for yourselves, because that's how caregivers are. They give and give and give, nothing left to give. They rarely put their oxygen mask on first. So explain the fear part. I know you touched on it before.
Actually, that's a good question because even though I was quarantined as soon as I was tested at the hospital, a week before that, I was having so many of the the COVID patients in that I self-quarantined away from my in-laws. Now, I love my mother-in-law, and I'm
They live
crazy
just
about
down
my
the block,
father-in-law,
right?
about a mile away. We love them to death, and I had to talk with them. I said, guys, I want you to know I love you, but to protect you, I'm self-quarantining myself from you so you don't get it. Because I figured it was only a matter of time because I was coming across so many of these patients. I just didn't want to explode. Actually, we stopped going to our church too. I had a heart-to-heart talk with my pastor. I said, Pastor, I love this church. I love you, but I have to do this. And he understood. No problem. We still maintain contact. But for a long time, when we went over there, we had the mask, social distancing. We limited contact. And it was bad because, again, both are around 90 years old. And we are used to being over there frequently, checking up on them, loving on them. And it was very lonely for them. And as time went by, then we could ease it up somewhat. But it was scary at first because, again, part of the learning curve. And we had to put up all this gear, isolation equipment before you even go in the room. I remember one time we had a code on one of our COVID patients had actually, his heart had stopped. And before we can go in the room, we had to put in all the gear, and we had to make sure each other was very careful not to become exposed while we were trying to save their life. And that was kind of rough. Yeah.
Did you go through depression or anxiety or boredom? I mean, what were you going through when you were quarantined because you wanted to protect your loved ones? And what do you recommend to people who they can't stay away from them because they're like in the next room? How do you effectively quarantine yourself from someone who's just in the next room and you've got to feed them, they got to go to the bathroom, bathe them, etc.? What's up with that?
Well, I think that, there's a job, you're an essential worker at that point. Being a caregiver is an essential worker job. I'm not talking about in the hospital, but like for a home. I was doing home care visits. You have to, you got to carry on all the universal precautions. And, I think the reality is we're going to die of something. And that we just, that's,
we're down to that, huh?
That's what it is, though. You were going to die of something. And of course, we don't want anybody to suffer, but you do the best you can, and that's all you can do. And I think when you come to the terms, I even told my parents, I said, you're going to die of something, and so hopefully I'm not the one that brought it to you. But I think the other thing, too, is, acting responsibly takes away, even if they do become infected, as a caregiver, being the most responsible I can be takes away that feeling that I've done everything I can. The other thing, if that's if you have to really be like on hand caregiving. The other thing too is like for a caregiver that can't be present all the time. I sent a lot of cards out. I mailed a lot of cards. I did a lot of phone calling. I tried to stay in touch so that the seniors that I was daily involved with had some kind of contact, because I've talked to my four siblings, and I said, so what, mom and dad are going to die of loneliness? Are they going to die of depression? Or are they going to die of the COVID? Like what, because they're very sociable
or
people.
Suicide.
Right. So, I think a lot of it is just finding a place of peace and doing the best you can. And that's what we're trying to do with the masks right now. That's what we're trying to do with the hand washing and being responsible. And, we all know if we're responsible and something happens, there's less guilt and, regret. Yeah.
Yeah.
But along that same line of questioning, Dave, is that absolutely masks, good masks, also social distancing, washing hands, hand sanitizer, all these things, and just use wisdom. Now, my nurse manager, when she had the COVID, she just recently came back a few weeks ago. She had to send her kids to a relative for them to take care of her kids, and she had friends and family who would look in on her and drop food off at the door, and she had to self-isolate in that way. It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. But
we're up on another break, but we're just going to keep talking because we got so much to cover here and we're running out of time. But you bring up a good point about the masks, and thank you, Bill, for that question. Bill wants to know more, how do you keep a positive attitude, and should we be listening to the media or just turn it off? A lot of misinformation out there. But before you answer that, you brought up masks. You said good masks. That's a good point because there's a lot of different masks out there. They said, wear your shirt, wear a bandana, wear this and that. None of those things have been tested. And, coronavirus, even bacteria, even regular virus can pass through a lot of that stuff. Are we really being safe by wearing any mask? Or should we, now they say, well, you can't have a medical mask because you guys need them. So what is that all about? And is a mask just giving us a sense of false security? And that's another where the left and the right vehemently disagree on this.
A mask is better than no mask, even though it's
so there's
not
good, better, and best, right?
There you go.
There is mediocre, good, better, and best. Like when you pull it up like that, that's better than nothing. But
better than sneezing on somebody and your shirt isn't above your nose.
Exactly. But the
N95
N95
are okay.
Yeah, the N95 are the best, and that's what you sent us. By the way, thank you again.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an essential worker. I have a gas station. I got God knows who coming in, wanting to buy things, wanting to pay things, giving us their money, using the restroom. We got to clean that restroom. So we only use, N95 and K94 Korean masks, and those are the ones I sent you. And believe it or not, I was criticized, and we sell them too. I was criticized that, you're taking. So I went to my local hospital. They said, are you giving them away? I says, well, no, I'm a businessman. I'll sell them to you at cost if you want them. No, we don't need them. So it's like they weren't really desperate, you hear these stories about that they're, like you said, recycling and wearing kerchiefs and this and that. But that really wasn't true. Now, maybe it's true in isolated spots in the Midwest or something, but it certainly wasn't true in my neighborhood. But I took a lot of heat for wanting to protect myself. It's like you can't win.
Yeah. Somebody's always going to complain. And I don't think it's the same issue now, Dave, where I don't see the same shortage now that we had at the beginning because all these other companies have revamped and been churning them out like the M&Ms. And and
the internet is full of other masks, designer masks, and I ask, well, what's that thing made out of? I mean, how safe is your designer mask, or even the one that say Black Lives Matter, or I can't breathe, or I love LA, or whatever. How safe have they been tested? What level do you know you're getting? And now there's copper masks. Is that good, better, or best? We just don't know.
Well, I think, people, we can't even get people to cooperate to wear a mask.
Yeah, a lot of people come to my station, and we have to argue with them. And they say, well, this is a big conspiracy. I says, go across the street or put on a mask, but you're not using my restroom without a mask. I'm sorry. And, we don't care what kind of mask, which, I don't know. It's frustrating. And it's very hard on my employees. Many of them don't like confrontation, and they go home anxiety-ridden, and have to see a doctor for the anxiety or on medication for the anxiety because they have to tell customers, put your mask on.
Dave, I tell you, whenever I get into an argument with somebody about the mask, you can go back and forth. Finally, I usually say, tell you what, come to my hospital. I take you down to the morgue. You can talk with them about whether you should wear a mask. Now, they don't talk very much, but I bet they'll win the argument. And every single time, that stops the argument. I take you down to the morgue, and then you can argue with them, and that stops the argument. You can talk all about your constitutional rights for a mask. Just wear the mask to help somebody else out. Now, technically, Mona and I don't have to wear a mask because we have antibodies, but we wear it as an example to other people.
Right.
And so there won't be a lot of
for their peace of mind, not yours. Thank you, Bill, for your question. Amy has a question. My stepson with autism doesn't want me to love on my husband. So that sounds like a guilt issue, right?
Say it again, please.
And you have an autistic child, so you know. My stepson with autism doesn't want me to love on my husband. Hug and kiss, I'm assuming. Because maybe his understanding is limited. I don't know. How do you deal with that?
Well, we don't know the degree of his autism, but just explain to him. I mean, if you're right there in the same house, if you're going to catch it from each other, you probably would have already, depending on how long, how close you are. It took Mona myself.
Maybe if he will never understand, just do it secretly. I don't know.
There you go.
I mean, it took Mona 2 days to catch it from me, and I was trying to be isolated from her. So I don't know how.
And I come home to my wife every day, and I try to be careful. We have masks, employees and customers. We have the shields. We have the sanitizers. And I'm amazed that I'm still healthy and she's still healthy. But thank God, And I'm 66, so I'm in the high-risk group. But I'm very healthy 66. I have no medical issues.
Yeah.
Right.
So as far as that example you gave us, I'd say play it by ear. I mean, try to explain it. Again, we don't know the degree of the autism. But, and again, if you need to limit it around him, it's hard to give a straight answer, Dave, on that one.
Yeah. So let's talk about. You talked about there's many ways to die, Mona, and that is so true. What is the danger? Because it's like I think about how up in Washington State they would shut down the entire logging industry because they wanted to save a white spotted owl from extinction, and all these people went broke and this and that. I mean, the cure, the medicine can't be worse than the disease. The cure can't be worse than the disease. And I talk about suicide. I just spoke about that at CNN, at that medical conference. Suicide rates are through the roof, not only for healthcare workers and the teenagers, which were already high, but the general population and caregivers are even more prone to suicide because they have a very, very stressful job, right up there with, disposing of nuclear waste. I joke. But what is the dangers of isolation? And some states are talking, no, kids can't go back to school till we get a vaccine, and that could be years. And some people don't want to try a vaccine that's going to come out maybe in November, because some people say, no, you need like 18 months at least. Otherwise, from one of the other viruses, there was people who had paralysis that was linked to that. I mean, you just have to study these people for a long period of time. So what is the risks of isolation versus, just keeping kids out of school, etc., when I'm told that kids are less prone to receiving it, and they say, well, then they can transmit it to teachers. Well, I don't know if that's known or not. The World Health Organization at one time said that they can't, and then they backed it up because you don't know what you're hearing is political or factual anymore. And that's why I would say just turn off the media. But then if you're turning off the media, where are you going to get your information from? I know I gave you a lot to talk about there, so take your time.
Well, I know personally, I get my information from a variety of sources. Most of it's from YouTube. I can control the commercials and other things. I just get the information. I try not to listen to it all the time because it'll drive you nuts. But as far as a school, Dave, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And it's a hard question because I can see both sides, but...
Yeah, you have kids. If they were young, what would you do? It is a tough question.
It's different in our case because Mona it'd be very easy for Mona to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, you
'Cause we,
homeschooled your kids anyway.
yeah,
A little bit.
a little bit we did,
But
but
some
we could.
some parents just aren't built that way.
Yeah, well, we didn't do it for the entire school career either. We only did it for a few years because it wasn't working out for us. But that's a different issue.
And
Um,
many parents can't go to work, back to work, because
Right.
the kids are at home and they're just not good teachers. And maybe they need to join a homeschool group because those are around.
Yep, we've
Right.
got friends of ours who've done that when they were younger, and we've also had know of people. I mean, working from home is going to be a big thing to do that, but there are some issues with that as well. But that may never change. I mean, we may be doing more and more of that.
I mean, I just don't think the whole thing is, nothing is ideal. Nothing is. Staying home for some parents is torture. Sending your kids to school is torture. Not bringing in enough money is torture. I don't think that, there's a lot of, I think we're going to see a lot of disciplinary issues with children that have been left to themselves at home. I
Yeah.
think that we're going to see a whole different generation based on what has even happened. I think 2020 is going to be a launching pad for, like, we really don't know. It's like a lottery. Throw it up in the air and see what comes down.
Yeah.
Because money has been an issue, politics has been an issue, hurricanes and earthquakes and, like, natural disaster people have suffered during the COVID and then the COVID. And then we've
Throw
also
on
seen
top of that an election and rioting and looting
Oh,
and
right, all
more
that.
division.
There's also been a lot of, let's think of this for a minute too. A lot of people have lost loved ones, whether they've died in the hospital or at home, and haven't had the ability to have closure or support,
That's sad.
which has really been sad. I have a couple of friends whose moms have Alzheimer's, and they went down just because they weren't allowed to come to the hospital. They bring a tray to them at the hospital. If they eat, they eat. They don't eat, they take there was just a lot of that kind of thing. It's just a lot of changes. I don't think anything is win-win. I think it's, you're just going to have to find a place of peace somewhere.
It's very individual.
Yeah.
I wish I could give you a straight answer on that, Dave, but
Yeah.
it's got to be very individual.
Let's talk about the drugs. People are talking about steroids in the earlier or the later, I don't remember, but HQ, they're saying if you take it, in the early stages, you won't need to be hospitalized. So, and that's become very, very political. I mean, very political, to the fact where testing has stopped, and we're not even checking it out to see if it's true or not. A lot of people are fearful now because of things they've heard in the media that they don't even want to volunteer for testing. I mean, what's your opinion on this whole drug versus vaccine versus antibody and politics playing a part?
I think it's ridiculous. I think that if there's a chance something could help, then you should offer it.
And
From
many
what
are,
I-
right? Many are. Has your hospital been doing it at any time in the past?
My understanding, again, apolitical, but my understanding is that the HQ actually was showing some promise. Was it 100% to get rid of it? No, but it was showing improvement. It was showing promise. I was just reading again, like I was mentioning, that when you give steroids throughout the advancement of the disease, that you can decrease it and decrease the severity of it from the respiratory standpoint. We found that if you position patients certain ways in ICU, it helps the breathing. That's simple, but that was trial and error. They learned that actually by accident, that it helps them to mobilize secretions and get rid of it. There are certain things that, if there's any chance it could help, then they should be utilizing it. That's it.
I wonder if everyone would feel differently about HQ if Trump wasn't the first one to speak about it. It's a shame. It's really a shame.
It's a shame.
Apolitical.
Yeah.
It's hard to be apolitical.
I know it's hard. We only have maybe 6 more minutes left. What should we talk about that we did not talk about yet?
Well, I do believe that when we initially began to social distance and wear masks, we were seeing a big decrease in the exposure cases. But it's when the college kids went to the beach and they just hung out on the beaches and they just ignored and they said, well, it's not going to affect us, but they carried it home to their family and it affected the rest of the family. And the rioters, I think it's ridiculous because the people, we were doing so well, and then they started doing this and began spreading again even faster. Well, if you're doing something that is working and then you stop doing it, don't be surprised if it stops working because you're no longer doing what you were doing before. Yeah. All I can say is social distancing, masks, good hand hygiene, it works. It works.
I think it's, I agree with Jim on all that, but I think it has also taken a toll with the lack of physical contact. I mean, I work a physical job. That's what physical therapy is. And, without the hands-on, I believe that the temperament of people have become impatient, unloving, unkind. I think we're missing a component with the social distancing that is very sad. I know that, I am a toucher. I definitely express myself through hand-holding and through some kind of contact. But, we found...
Which humans need, by the way, or they die.
We absolutely do. But there are ways to express love. Our eyes can speak a lot, and animating our face. And also, people can send cards. I know in Jim's lunches, because he's a first responder and he works really hard, I often throw a little note in his lunchbox to remind him that he's appreciated. I'm just saying that, like, with caregivers, there are some ways, if you can't make physical contact, that we can stay connected to our loved ones and families.
Dave, can I throw something in on what Mona's saying?
Yeah.
When Mona and I were both sick, people said, wasn't it difficult being that intensely together? It wasn't. Because Mona and I, one, we enjoyed being with each other. And we had to take care of each other. I was bad at the beginning.
Caregivers to the caregiver.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got the cast on. You're right.
Dave, are you kidding?
Did you see that?
Yeah, let's see it again.
There you go.
I was actually saying to myself, he's got a suit jacket on and he's in shorts.
Underwear, okay, but we won't talk about that.
At the beginning, I needed it more, and then but we did what we had to do. We did what we had to do. Yeah. And with my in-laws, like we said, is about a mile away. As soon as we could, we started going back over there. But happily, we have a sister-in-law in the general location who could cover for us when we couldn't do it. The kids are calling us every day. Just there are ways of maintaining contact, of showing love for each other. Because you're right, people are social creatures. Yep. We need the interaction. And but instead of people worrying about your constitutional rights about whether you should wear a mask or not, think about your next door neighbor, your family. Just do it for them. And remember,
err on the side of caution. I mean, I don't mind wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And I don't argue with store owners going in there. And some of my competitors I've gone on because I've heard that they're not enforcing it. So I went into another gas station and I watched, and sure enough, some people go in without a mask and they don't say a word about it. And it's the law here in LA County. So, we just have to do what we have to do. And I understand because they don't like the confrontation and maybe they're afraid their employees will quit and this and that. But, I don't want to bring it home to my wife. And I have other workers who don't want to bring it home to their elderly parents. And, I mean, that's the bottom line. And it's true. We don't know. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. But what if they're wrong? Better to err on the side of caution. Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Dave.
And we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again.
Okay.
Keep